Hey, scrappy people, Tracy Reed here today, and today we are going to be learning how to make an adorable and simple 3x4 album out of your spare 3x4 cards and 4x6 cards. So this album is a lot easier than it looks, although I think it looks pretty easy, but it is super cute and there is room for a ton of photos and a ton of journaling if you want, and it's double-sided, which is super cute and fun. I have some tags in some pockets, some trimmed down journaling cards in some pockets too, and really this album is super customizable for a lot of different things you can do. You can add flip ups and flip outs and a whole bunch of other things as well. So let's get into the construction of it. And today I'm going to be using the Cocoa Daisy Take Flight collection, which is an adorable springy sort of collection with a kind of a cool color palette. It has, you can see over there on the left hand side, it doesn't have your typical pastel spring colors. It has some deeper colors. So I have a piece of thick 8.5 by 11 printer paper here. I would say if you don't have nice and thick printer paper, to go ahead and use a thin cardstock, because this does need to hold up to lots and lots of folding. You can also use cardstock hinges. So I have scored this paper along the 11-inch side at 3 inches, 6 inches, and 9 inches, which is going to give me a bunch of 3x4 accordion folds once I trim it down to 2 sheets of 3, or I guess it would be 11 by 4 paper. So it's 11 by 4 that I'm going to actually glue 2 pieces together right now using a 3 by 4 as a guide for how wide I want it to be. Perfect. So this is sort of overkill. You don't have to have this big of an album. I just had a lot of cards that I wanted to incorporate, so I wanted to make it extra large. I do end up cutting off at least one of those 3x4 squares. And if I had planned a little bit better, I would have cut off a couple more, but using this as the base of my album, I'm going to just very simply start adhering 3x4 cards to each of these spots. Now, one thing I will say is that you will probably need to trim some of the 3x4s that are going to fold or that bump up against the edge of your folds here, just because when you start folding the paper, it gets just ever so slightly smaller and smaller. So in some instances, you will just need to trim slightly the cards down. So this one I end up trimming just like 1/8 of an inch off of the edge of this fold. You can see I'm using a 4x6 card rather than a 3x4 card that I folded in half. And I'm just going to trim slightly just so that it doesn't bump up against that fold. Perfect. And then I can go ahead and start adding more cards. I'm trying to alternate here between patterned cards, cards for journaling, and cards that I will be using for photos, just so that there is some continuity throughout the album and I don't have like 2 photos next to each other or 2 journaling cards next to each other. So I'm just making sure to alternate. I'm going to take this Nothing But Blue Skies 3x4 card, and I'm actually going to make it into a pocket, or my first pocket in the album, by trimming it all the way directly to the bottom of the sentiment. Then I'm going to use my 1.5 inch circle punch to cut a notch at the top, and then I'm just trimming off the excess too. I think I trimmed it down to a 3x3. I'm going to use red line tape along the outside edges and the bottom edge to turn it into a pocket. And since my red line tape is 1/8 of an inch, or I'm sorry, 1/4 of an inch, that will mean that anything I put in there needs to be, oh no, it's definitely 1/8 of an inch. Anything I put in there needs to be 1/4 of an inch smaller. Sorry, brain fry. 1/4 of an inch smaller than the 3x4 card widthwise. So just keep that in mind when you are cutting down your inserts into these pockets. I'm not going to put anything in this pocket yet. I didn't even put anything behind it because I thought that the white looked really good with the white lettering. I love this rainbow card, and I thought it was really cute paired here. And you can see you can keep it as an accordion folded album, or you can open it all the way up like this. I kind of like flipping through it like a little folded album rather than pulling it all the way out, but I am making sure that if it's pulled all the way out and opened fully, it still has a lot of, or has some continuity and doesn't look too unbalanced. So if I had put the rainbow stripe that you see over there next to those rainbows, I think that it would have been a bit overwhelming, whereas that watercolor card was nice and neutral next to that bold pattern. I'm also going to take one more of these 4x6s and I'm going to fold it in half and create a folded end piece to match the other end that has a folded 4x6. And that's going to allow me to cut off that extra 3x4 at the end as well. So this is going to serve as the end piece of this side of the album, but it'll also be the front of the other side of the album, sort of. So I'm going to put a title card here over the top of that back side of that 4x6, and I'm just making sure to go ahead and trim every time there's a little bit of overhang just as I go along, and I want to make sure that it closes nicely as well. So now I can flip it over and finish this page. I thought maybe I wanted to do that quote card face up, but I thought once I put it down that it was a little bit too much yellow, too big of a block of color. So instead I'm going to use this 4x6 card with the blue hot air balloons, and I think that that was a little bit more neutral. I also trimmed down this 3x4 card vertically, or I guess horizontally, so that it was nice and skinny and I could create another pocket out of it. So I'm going to use my red line tape again, and I'm going to create a pocket with this trimmed down card on that blue cloud card because it says in a sky full of clouds be a rainbow, so the cloud background was perfect. Trying to make sure again that I am keeping this nice and, sorry about my hair, nice and balanced. So I wanted to make sure that the quote card was away from all of the other quote cards. Trimming this down, making sure that everything works right. Now I'm going to fold this one in half, and I'm going to make sure that the crease goes directly into the crease of the base that I'm using so that there is no problem with it folding. Perfect. Then I'm just going to add more adhesive here and just close it. Easy way to get it to close perfectly. All right, I only have 2 more spaces to fill here. I really like the way that this is coming out. I do know that in an album this size, I don't need a ton of journaling, so I'm making sure to keep in mind that I'm not adding too many journaling spots. In the end, I can always go in and add things over the journal cards if I don't have a lot to say, including photos or just decor, but I want to make sure that I have lots of patterned strips. I also am going to add one more of this rainbow pattern strip paper just because I think it's so cute and it'll be a good base for photos. All right, making sure I align this perfectly so that it doesn't interfere. Then I will need to go through and just fold it up a few more times to make sure that it will close right. I decided I really wanted this positive energy, and I'm going to take this, now that I've punched it out, I'm going to take the rest of the card and I'm going to make it a pocket as well, trimming down both sides so that it's not too tall. Again, with the red line tape, and then it's going to go directly on this journaling card right at the bottom, making sure that if there's any overlap in the creases, I am trimming it off because otherwise the album won't close easily. It's a very fly by the seat of your pants process here. So now you can see the album is all put together. I'm going to add in a couple of cards and stuff into the pockets, and I also need to close this album. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit here and add in a couple of things. I'm going to add a red tag, which is just some scrap paper. I'm going to add it to this pocket. You can see I cut one corner and then used it as a template to cut the other corner so that they match perfectly. I'm going to do the same with this background, which is just the other side of that paper. And I'm going to use it as a tag as well in one of the other pockets. I like the way that the kite looks on that tag. I think it framed out really nicely. I already trimmed this card down. Sorry, I'm a little bit high here. I already trimmed that card down to fit in that pocket, but I just needed to trim it slightly shorter and a little bit less wide, a little bit narrower so that it fit in that pocket. And then I have some placeholders here just for a visual for you. 2.5 by 3.5 photos leaves a nice border around the outside edges. If you don't care about the patterned border, then you can just go ahead and print 3x4s and put them directly over the pattern cards. If you're gonna do that though, I would suggest just not wasting the cards at all and just adhering the photos directly into the album as you make it, so that you're not wasting any, first of all, you're not wasting any cards, but also so that you're not making the album unnecessarily thick. If you don't care about the border on the photo, then you don't need to make it doubly thick by putting a photo over a card. All right, this one I'm gonna add a 3x3 mat with a 2.75 by 2.75. Oh, it's a 2.75 mat with a 2.5 inch photo, just to change it up a little bit. And when I go to make this album, I can always change the sizes later too. I just barely stuck these down so that they didn't ruin the papers or the cards when I pull them apart. So I'm just checking my work, making sure everything looks good here. Last thing I need to do is add in the string that's going to hold this all together, but I want to make sure that everything is closing properly first. So there is some string in the Take Flight collection that I'm going to use, but I really only have a tiny piece left. So it's going to make a teeny tiny bow. I would suggest making your bow a little bit bigger so that it's easier to close, but I worked with what I had. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this around the album and tie my bow. And then I'm going to take that piece that I cut out of that card, that word piece, if you remember, actually this card, and I'm going to use it as the anchor for that string in the back. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my tape runner to tape it down initially, and then I'm going to come back with some liquid glue and I'm going to make sure that it's nice and stuck. I like the symmetry with that half circle there as well. So that is it for this video. If you enjoyed it, I'd love it if you give it a thumbs up. If you're new here, go ahead and subscribe. I would love to have you. If you don't already, you can follow me over on Instagram. I'm at Tracy Reed. I'd love to see you over there as well. And I will see you next time. Thank you.